Welcome to Unemployed and Afraid, a podcast that explores the glorious mess of building your own business with the people doing it. I'm your host and fellow business builder, Kim Curtin. Thank you for being here. Let's get into some good, honest, small business chat. I can't wait for you to hear this chat because it's just so refreshing and honest. This business owner bringing you her story is the engaging Raechel Whitchurch, owner and head booking agent of Sure Thing Agency. And in her story, she shares with you all about aligning work to family needs, knowing you want to work for yourself before knowing what you'll be doing, finding a niche just by getting started, backing in your own value, measuring success beyond financials, such a great way to look at it, a view on our inbuilt fear of appearing flaky for pivoting, that one triggers me a little bit, and paying later for our flexibility in business, something that I think a lot of us find hard to explain to other people, and the concept of future faking that we do as entrepreneurs, another one that may hit home. If you want real stories of building the business of your dreams, you are in the right spot. Let's get into it. I'm here with the very talented Raechel Whitchurch, owner and head booking agent of Sure Thing Agency, a prominent boutique music booking agency in the Australian music industry. Raechel has a passion for curating extraordinary careers for talented artists, and that's likely because, as well as being the founder of Sure Thing Agency, she's a talented and highly celebrated country music artist herself. Just one example of her work is in 2021, the release of her debut album, Finally Clear, which debuted at number 1 on the ARIA Australian Country Album Charts and was nominated for 2 Toyota Golden Guitar Awards, New Talent and Traditional Country Album of the Year. I've been listening to the track Where Magnolias Grow on repeat at the moment. It is like the perfect song for those days in business where you feel super overwhelmed in this gig, which is every day. Raechel now also manages her own music career alongside building her business and representing a select group of renowned musicians, going beyond the conventional norms of the music industry to seek strategic alliances and partnerships with festivals, venues, events, and most importantly, fans, reimagining and reinventing booking and event management services while offering a deeply personal touch to each artist's journey. Creativity and business so often go hand in hand, and when your passion becomes your career and it becomes your business, it can be quite the wild journey, which I cannot wait to hear all about. Raechel, welcome to Unemployed and Afraid.
Hello, Kim, and thank you so much for having me to talk about one of my favorite topics, as I just said to you off air, just business. I love talking about business, and I'm so stoked to be here with you today.
Me too. It really is my favorite thing. Like whenever I can get into it, it's so nerdy, but whenever I can get into a party or, if it's a network function, it's easier. But if ever I can get into a party and I'm like, so what do you do? And they're like, I have a business. I'm like, yes, let's talk smack about all the chaos that it is. So you're in the perfect place for that.
My husband is always like, please don't talk about business tonight. I'm like, I'm sorry, I can't help it. And so I have to really rein it in when we go out. So I feel you.
I saw a meme. I don't know if it was a meme recently. It's just, some sort of internet thing, probably a TikTok. And it said something along the lines of like, I would love to be the fly on the wall for the 6 minutes of conversation that a couple has before they close their eyes. And I was like, no, you would not like to do that in my house because it's either completely random, like on a total tangent about some silly topic, or I'm talking about work, business. So gosh. It's relatable.
I could not agree more. And I feel like more often than not, depending on the day I've had at work, it's either me rambling about, today was great, I did this, I did that, or I'm saying to my husband, I'm quitting. Today's the last day.
Oh, this is literally me yesterday. I had in the same day a complete business breakdown, tears and all. And then about 3 hours later, I was absolutely riding on a high because something amazing had happened. I was like, I love this. So yeah, I feel you. Tell me a little bit more about him, actually. How do you think he would describe you, your husband?
Oh my gosh, that's a great question. No one's ever asked me that before. I think that he would probably describe me as very outgoing, very extroverted, probably a risk taker. And we have this joke where, when he hears me on the phone or he sees me talking or negotiating or whatever, and he's like, oh my gosh, I just love hearing you. I just love it, like listening to you. I'm just like, yes, girl, get it. And he's like, but I just don't like it when you do it to me. I'm sure you know the feeling, right? When you just like, you're like, I love it, but just like keep it into like that work context, nothing more than that. So no, he loves what I do, and he's also a creative as well. And he started his own business just last year, and so he's been growing that. And so we're very much in the thick of it together. And I think that because I am a little more of a risk taker than he is, I think it's given him the courage to take more risks for his life and for his business. And I think we have a really good working relationship where, he very much, even though, we work closely together on some things, we very much have our own roles and responsibilities. There's not a lot of crossover. No one's really like the boss of someone else's workload. And so I think that's a really good place for a marriage to be in business.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think we learn so much about ourselves as individuals in business that can only positively influence how we interact in relationships too. So yeah, I couldn't agree more. Tell me about the seed moment, the lead in moment, the runway where, you're building your career and you start to get this inclination that actually I think I can do my own thing within this space. What was that experience like for you, and what did you get started on?
My experience was very much one where I started having children, and I realized that it was nearly impossible to be the mother that I wanted to be and to work a full-time job, and that those two things just couldn't go hand in hand, for me. And they can for many people. And I think it depends on kind of how you envision your life, looking. And so for me, I did not want to be sending my kids off, to daycare at 7 a.m. every morning and then picking them up at 6 p.m. And so I started thinking about the idea of working for myself straight after I had my first child, who is 7 now. And I remember just thinking, okay, I can do this, and, have the maternity leave, and then I'll, go back to work. And oh my gosh, it was heartbreaking. I hated it. I hated every second of it. And just did not. He was fine, by the way. Like, he was having the time of his life probably. But, I just didn't love the process. I didn't love how rushed everything felt. I think I don't like to rush. It's something that I try really hard not to do with my children, is to rush them. And also I found that there was no place left for boredom either in our life, because it was so full and busy. And I think without boredom, there's no room for creativity. That was kind of the first inkling of like, I'm not sure if this is going to work. And so, less than 2 years later, just over a year later, I became pregnant with my second child, which is my daughter Magnolia, and pregnant with her. And I said to my husband, I don't want to work for anyone ever again. And he was just like, okay. So we lived in Sydney at this point. And I decided I never want to work for anyone ever again. I want to work for myself. And he was like, well, how are you going to do that? And I was like, well, I don't know. But when she's born, well, I didn't have spoken, when the baby is born, I've got 1 year of maternity leave, and I've got to figure it out. I've got 1 year, and that's the only, the only time I can do it. Like, if I don't do it, then I have to go back to work. So when my daughter, I started, sort of putting things into place and working at nights before she was born, and thinking about what it might look like. And then after she was born, I almost immediately started working for myself. I didn't really have a name for my business. I just started reaching out to clients that I thought I could work with, and just loosely sort of, dipping my toe in. And then kind of by the time came time, for me to think about going back to work, I'd built up enough of an income that it definitely wasn't matching a full-time job in Sydney in the corporate world, but it was definitely enough that we could justify, okay, if we tighten our belts a little, I don't have to go back to work. I can do this.
I find that very brave. And I think it's something that I'm constantly fighting with, this battle of having it all worked out before I go to market, quote unquote, with, some kind of offering or some kind of approach or a pitch to be like, hey, could we work together on X? I feel often an inclination to be like, the service is this, it costs this much, and this is exactly how I'm going to deliver on this, the process behind it, like before even getting the courage to send an email to someone, which can be very frustrating. But then in other circumstances, I'm like, throw shit out there and just see how it goes. And,
Yes.
I think that's a big part of the learning cycle. When you started to get a little bit of feedback from the market that you're putting out there, and you're like, okay, like I can, I might be able to build like something here. What was your approach to then, making it something that you could bill for and generate revenue for?
It's so interesting just now hearing talk about, your personal style, and saying, you like to have things organized. And I think that I think as human beings, whether it's, nature or nurture, I don't know, we all do have a style, right? And so my style is very the dirt's left on, and it's very much just like, let's just see what happens. I grew up with parents that were very entrepreneurial, and they were both last children. And so I'm like the first child of two last children, which is like an interesting dynamic if know anything about, your place in your family and things like that. And so I like risks, but I do also like a plan. But I definitely am probably more inclined just to throw something out and see if it sticks. So when I started doing this, because I was starting from a place of, I think, I don't want to say desperation, but like I desperately didn't want to go back. I desperately wanted to be able to work and have my children around me, and my husband and I share that. And so I was almost willing to do things that now I'm not prepared to do. And so, for example, I knew I had experience in the music industry. I had a long history in the music industry. I'd worked for an agency. I was a head booking agent at another agency in my early 20s. I know the music industry really well, and I still had a lot to learn. And I also was a young woman, late 20s. That's generally not the person who starts a booking agency in Australia, at least, or I think even worldwide. And so there were a lot of challenges to come up against. But I think that when I started, I got a couple of clients, and I just really was like, I'm just going to service the heck out of these accounts. Like, they are just going to love me, right? And so my boundaries were probably lower in terms of the service I provided, purely because I was desperate for the work. And so, you know what I mean? Like, you've got clients who sometimes they're a little overbearing. They maybe ask for a little more than is really what you've promised. As in, usually you would say, well, that's not part of the services I offer. That's not what you've paid for. But for me, I kind of went above and beyond for the few clients that I had. And so I also took a bunch of other things that I wouldn't do. So I did a bit of event management. I did a bit of project management for various companies on different things. And that's not really what I wanted to do. I wanted to do music, but I also had to pay the bills, right? So I did a few things with some like visual artists and things like that, where I project managed things for them. And so I guess when you say like, what was my strategy, or, there wasn't really a strategy. It was very ad hoc, and it was very much, how can I make this work, and what can I do to buffer that income whilst I make it work? Like most people who do anything in project management or whatever, there's a long lead time between taking the job and getting paid, and so you've kind of got to, make the ends meet, right, between, that time. And so, I was booking tours that maybe weren't going to happen for 6 months, 8 months. And so there's a lot of lead time before you get paid. One thing that came out of, because I was so really trying to service these clients well that I had, I remember the two main clients I was working with at the time, because I went above and beyond, I sort of found this, I guess, niche in the market that wasn't being fulfilled. And that's how I started specializing in this. Obviously I'm a booking agent, but it's a very personalized service. And that's something that has been missing from booking agents for a really long time. It can be a very copy paste, very cookie cutter approach, especially with bigger agencies, as they have a lot of clients and they kind of are very focused on the bottom line. A lot of the time, they'll take on too many clients, and it becomes very cookie cutter, just like, just do the same thing over and over again. And then if it doesn't work, get rid of them and get a new client, right? And so whereas my strategy has always been around, I think pretty hard before I take a client on, and then I'm more or less committed to you for life. It's like a marriage. As long as you want to work with me, I'll be there, right? Even, to my own detriment, because if I believe in it, I'm going to make this work. We're going to make this work. So yeah, I think that desperation sort of uncovered a need within the music industry for a specific type of client who wanted a very personalized approach, which I believe in reality should be what every agent is delivering anyway, but they're not all delivering that. And so I think the positive that came out of that was I found my niche, and the clients that needed that or wanted that were then attracted to me.
I think that's a really underrated approach. And, I say this with caution because I also share, like, with my listeners who listen regularly, they'll know I'm always like, get yourself paid, prestige. I'm all for prestige pricing. I'm all for,
Yes.
making sure you value yourself. But on the same hand, I am absolutely all for putting yourself out there, proving yourself, allowing a bit of test and learn, and going through that process of, kind of like not feeling great maybe about the work that you do financially, or even like time-wise for a little while, or as you and I were talking about before we hit record, putting your knowledge out there for free in some aspects of your knowledge in order to show people who you are and what you can do and learn from that. Like, it's such a valuable piece. It's like time, it takes time and it kicks your butt and you feel really annoyed and you're like, how do I hold the bigger vision here? But like this mentality of we'll have a business idea and then within 3 months it'll be chilling, like it'll be fine and it'll be turning over. It's like far more like, no, you'll spend that first 3 months trying to figure out how to get into your accounting software. That's just me. But you will spend ages trying to figure out, how do I do billing, and then how do I like communicate? How do I deliver this? What's my process? What document am I doing? What's my saving? Like all of that stuff. And then you deliver some stuff and then you kind of keep growing. But there's always a point where you then have to back yourself in with the clients and elevate and go like, okay, I've done the test and learn now. Now I have to elevate my service, either pricing or my structure, which I think feels a little bit scary for so many of us. Like, how, what am I going to lose? Like, once you get something, what am I going to lose by changing this approach now? Did you have that experience? And if so, what was that like for you?
Agent work is pretty, like, across the board worldwide. Agents get like an amount that is, it's not a secret. You can Google it. Booking agencies take 10%, like that's what they take. And so of course there's people out there who would probably negotiate, but likely negotiate less, meaning if a client is already very established, they may come to a booking agent and say, I'm happy to work with you, but I only want to pay 8%, or whatever. But we're talking like high level, the Taylor Swifts of the world, right? As opposed to just smaller acts. And so I think in that sense, of course, there are always people out there who will take less. Like, that's the reality of any industry you work in. There are people who will think, how do we get clients? Less money. And that's how I'm going to get them. And to me, like, I am not attracted to employ people who want less money, nor am I compelled to offer like my services for less money. Money is something I just don't really negotiate on for myself. I know what my value is. And so even when I started, I was like, it's 10%. That's what the industry standard is. That's what it is. And I just won't negotiate on that. And if a client tried to negotiate me, I would just say no. And because I really believe in my product, and I believe that I'll negotiate on the services I provide you, depending on what they are, but I won't negotiate on my value. And I think that when people drop their value, I think it speaks more to their belief in their work. To me personally, is when I see people start to lower their prices when they're, obviously not when they're starting out, but I'm talking about when they're established, right? And then when they negotiate, I often think to myself, oh my gosh, like, if you don't believe in your work, then I don't believe in your work, right? And so I find that really, just super challenging. I really do believe that when people start to negotiate their worth, I think that anything's up for grabs. And so I think it's important for me with business that, like I said, my industry is a little bit different because you don't really go away from that industry standard. But I also believe that, like, supply and demand is like, it's pretty easy, right? Supply and demand. If there's a lot of demand and you cannot meet that demand, then you're probably charging not enough. I always encourage people, and I've encouraged so many people that I've worked with, that then it's like been to my detriment, because I'm like, now I'm going to pay you more because you've taken your prices up. But like, I do really believe, and I think women are particularly bad at this. I think just look at your supply and demand, and you can see almost immediately whether or not you need to take your prices up.
I think the value of self through that is such an interesting topic and an interesting point, because when you do step out on your own and start to build something that's of your own, even the most confident of us can have those little glimmers of self-doubt where it's like, oh, I think I've just compared myself to too many others, or I don't know this one thing that I didn't realize I wasn't going to know. What am I going to do with this now? Like, I think that kind of confrontation with self-doubt and imposter syndrome, whatever you want to call it, is a bit of an inevitable and can impact us so much. And I can absolutely see the times where I've underquoted myself on certain service-based work where it's like I've doubted that they'll see the value because like it's a hard one to describe, or I've gone like, oh, but what if I'm not good enough? What if I'm not experienced enough? And you like undervalue, all of your aspects. Has that kind of like little battle with imposter syndrome or anything ever come up for you? And if it has, how have you tackled it?
Oh my gosh, constantly. You're right. It's everyone. Who doesn't? If people don't, they're lying. I just think that we truly all, we all have that all the time. And I think that's because, of course, if you compare, there's always going to be someone who's better than you, but never comparing ourselves to the person that's worse than us, are we? Like we're always
No.
comparing with the one up, right? And so
Mhm.
I think it's just, yeah, it's an inevitable thing, like you said. And I think that especially depending on what's important to you. And I was actually listening to this podcast the other day, just really interesting thing that stuck with me. And I was like, yes, I believe this so wholeheartedly. She was talking about how she had a client and they said to her, last year we did XYZ amount in our business, right? Like we did $1 million. And so this year we've got to beat that. And so, I'm already in the first quarter and like, I'm already like down, like, what would your encouragement be to me as I kind of look at this next year ahead and I'm starting to fall behind already? I feel really defeated. Like, what would you say to me? And so her answer was so profound to me. And she said, well, my first question would be, why did you like, what data did you base your desire to increase in this next 12 months? Like, what was that based upon? And what other KPIs do you have that are not financial? And so, for example, this year, like, if I only look at money, yeah, I could do that. Am I also going to look at the quality of my relationship with my children? Am I going to look at the quality of the relationship with my husband? Am I going to look at, my health, how fit I am, how many meals I cooked at home? And so I think, this imposter syndrome thing, I think it comes when we only start to think about success in like these binary terms, right? Well, this is success, A equals B. And I think that like there's so many other factors. And so one thing that I do, and this really helps keep me on track, is every year, like for the new financial year, I sit down, a few months in advance and I look at my business and I lay out what my goals are for the next 12 months. And I have like kind of monthly check-ins with myself, but I make sure that my goals aren't all financial. Of course, we all need money. I get that. But there are other things that are important to me aside from money. And so I kind of make these goals that are achievable and just not plucked out of nowhere. Like, when people are like, I made this much and now I want to double that. I'm like, what are those numbers based on? Do you have the ability to double your workload? Like, so I think, and as stupid as it sounds, I go back to the old SMART goals and I just, I write my goals out and I make sure they're all those things and that they're achievable and that they're, measurable and all those things. And then I check in with myself throughout the year. But I think it's important to remind yourself of like what was important to you at the beginning or like, whenever you've made your plans, so that when you come up against those feelings, you can remind yourself, hang on now, I'm actually running my own race. I'm not running the race of Joe Blow down the street or, Mary across the road. I'm running my race. And these are the things that are important to me and the goals that are important to me. So that's what helps me.
There are two truths about us business owners that both me and our incredible show partner Card Dog Gift know to be true. The first one is that we are some of the most generous humans on the planet. Maybe that's because we regularly have to push ourselves into uncomfortable spaces, learn to problem solve like crazy, and through all of that we realise how impactful the generosity of others is. Whether that's people who've supported us directly through free advice and guidance, or indirectly by sharing their story and learnings on this pod. The second thing I know is we're also often stretched on time and headspace. So whether you struggle to find the perfect gift for your friends and family, have a last minute special occasion that you're not feeling ready for, or want to say thank you to your clients, team members or support team and still make it personal, Card.gift have got you, and here is how. You can get physical or digital gift cards for retailers like Adore Beauty, Apple, Netflix, Uber and more, like 150 plus more. They have beautiful designs on the cards and support local artists by featuring their designs. Love that. You can get a Visa, MasterCard or EFTPOS gift card, which honestly just provides endless good feels for those you give it to. I personally love being able to get exactly what I want, or just get myself some silly little treats like an overpriced smoothie and say a silent thank you to the human who gifted it to me. And you can even get hyper personal with them with a custom photo, a heartfelt message, or even a video message. And lastly, Card.gift are the loveliest of teams. From their co-founder Nick to their marketing team of Lexi and Tash down in Melbourne, they're hardworking and care about what they do, and I value their support of this show so much as it helps me to keep supporting you to thrive. So next time you're being generous, type Card.gift into Google and thank me later. Yeah, it's funny how we can get so well supported in, like you say, SMART goals when we're in a corporate environment. There's always that structure that's around it, 360-degree feedback, annual reviews, set quarterly goals, lever them up to the company's KPIs. And there's that structure around it. Like I mean, I've got so many goals and like so many things that I'm working towards, but tend to not put it into anything kind of formal because I don't have to. So, I like just
Mm,
get more interested in like doing the work or doing this or, just
yeah.
getting caught up in it all. But we don't necessarily have those like markers in the sand. It makes me laugh though, because this weekend, actually, it's at the half year mark when we're recording this, and my partner and I were having our second whip, like our a half year whip. Just like
I love that. I love it.
and it's our first, first a chance, I guess. Like we talk about goals and where we're at and all that stuff all the time. But just to really sit down and look at, how are we both collectively and individually feeling about health, wealth, family, relationships, hobbies, goals, like what's
Hmm.
just all of that aspect to like have that line in the sand and be like, cool, how do we move forward to like be working in partnership with that? And
Mm.
yeah, I think as a business owner, you actually like you accidentally end up like creeping your like business goals into those sorts of conversations too. I know I will be. I'll probably be
Yeah.
talking about podcast goals at the same
Yeah.
time as our relationship goals. But yeah, it's important to have those measures of success. I think that's really great advice, and nice to hear that you're building that in for yourself, because it can be really hard to find that motivation as you're going through.
Mm. I think my husband and I actually have been doing this since we were first married, much to his dismay. When we first got married, he was like truly perplexed because he'd never done anything like that before. And he had such a state of anxiety every time I was like, let's have our, it's the new year, let's do our life meeting. And he was like, ew. He was like, I hate this. And so it really took a few years and just kind of like figuring out what worked for us. But the thing that changed it for us to something manageable was when we started doing them monthly. Because, like when I got married when I was in my very early 20s, like quite young. And so initially we're just like, we'll do our yearly goals and then we'll just check at the end if we did them or not. What a disaster that is. And so, like then when we started doing the monthly check-ins with each other, it felt like, we were able to adjust. And the biggest thing, this has been the game changer for me, it's okay to change your goals. If you get 3 months in and you're like, that goal actually sucks. I don't know why I made that goal. I'm not going to achieve that. That's unrealistic. You don't have to feel trapped and chained to this goal that you made or this, this KPI, because you're the boss. If you want to change it, just change it, And that's the whole thing, is like, we're the boss. We can decide what's right for our life. We can decide what's right for our families. We can decide what's right for our business. And I think it's okay. And look, this is all wrapped up, of course, as well in our fear of failure. We hate failing. And, I have become very comfortable with failure, and I almost celebrate it because, and when you were, I think you were saying before, like, we've all, started business and then we change and then we close the business and we do that. And when I hear people say stuff like that, I'm like, that's a success. That means you tried something. Just because we don't do a business for our whole life, that doesn't mean it's a failure. That means it met the need of the time. And then we decided that no longer fulfills my needs. That's no longer what I want to do. And I just think it's so inspiring when I see people who are brave enough to be like, that served a purpose and now that purpose is finished. And now I'm going to chase another dream. Because I just think that if we get caught up in, the habit of, I must, if we've got this internal, you must stay with that forever. I'm like, that's the old way of thinking. And also, you're still chained to a master. It's the master of this internal voice in your head that's making you do this crap that you don't want to do, right? And so I love failing. I think it's really helpful and really important. I literally try and ask my kids every week, okay, tell me something you failed at this week at school. I need to know. And they always think it's so hilarious and they just get so excited to tell me something they failed at.
Oh, I love that. That's so sweet. There's definitely that sunk cost fallacy, thing that's going on with our minds as well. Like psychologically, there's so much that works against us, but that's one in particular where you're just like, I went out into market, and I say out in market, it's a very corporate speak, but you're out in the world telling people, your family and your friends and your colleagues, your future clients, your current clients, just the public, that you are doing a thing. And then when you have to consider going back out to those same people and going, oh, I'm actually doing this thing now, there is that fear that people are, judging you as flaky or being like, I can't keep up with you, or I don't know what's happening with this. And like, I think about this a lot because I've definitely had more than a few pivots in my career as an entrepreneur, but also in my corporate career, and I'll have heaps more pivots. And there was a stage where I felt like I was really flaky and I was like, fuck, people don't get it. And, a few offhanded comments from friends over the years being like, what are you doing now? Like, you were a ceramicist. Now you're what? Like, it's like that used to rattle me. But now I look at it as an indication that like no one cares about what you're doing. No one is keeping tabs on exactly what you're doing. Like they're not thinking about us as much as we're thinking about ourselves. And so if you're able to just go out there and authentically be like, cool, I was doing this, but I'm not doing that anymore because of this reason, but here's what I'm doing now. And like those who will take an interest in you will take an interest in that story. It's authentic, it's real, and we should never be afraid to hide behind like putting some story or some false story out or seeing some idea through that's no longer serving us, or trying to over deliver on this perfect narrative to be like, this is why I did this because I knew this was coming, like super strategic. Like I'm definitely, a risk of that, like as I'm a strategist. So like, how does it all like look and work together? But you just got to let that go and just run with it.
I think also just remembering that like people aren't always aware of their biases or what's going on. Like I feel like most people aren't aware of what's going on under the surface for themselves, like unless they're like have done a lot of therapy and very self-aware and kind of know what's up. But I think most people, whenever they give you any sort of backhanded or negative comment, this is how I take it anyway, I'm always just like, oh, they're just showing me their insecurity. That's their insecurity. And so when I do that, that makes them feel something. And that's okay. They can feel that. I don't feel that. And so I think even if your friends are like, what are you doing now? My guess would be those friends of yours, and sorry, I don't know your friends or who, even if they're just like an example or an imaginary person. But I mean, my guess is they're probably in a job they've been in for like 25 years or, 20 years. And they probably just like hate it, but also are chained to this idea that they can't be flaky. Someone somewhere once in their life, a father or a mother or someone has instilled into that person, you cannot leave a job. A job is for life. And then when they see you do something where you're just like, I'm going to do this and I'm going to try that and they're just like, that rattles me. I don't, I feel uncomfortable with that idea because I can't do that. And so then they project that on to you. And so, and I truly believe that, if you listen hard enough, people will tell you exactly what their biggest fears are in the way they judge you.
Oh, I love that. That's something I think I might have to just like cut out as a little audio grab and just put into a TikTok video or something, or just like play it on loop to myself.
Let's do it. Play it on loop to myself. I have to remind myself. I mean, sure, sometimes maybe sometimes we're just being a crap person and someone needs to tell us. That's okay as well. But I do believe that a lot of the time, like I hear someone say something to me and I'm like, oh, this isn't even about me. This is something that's going on for you. Because as if you'd ever say that to a person, as if you'd ever be that rude to a person, unless there was some internal motivating force that made you not be aware enough to realize how rude you're being, And so I just feel like my priority is me and my family. And, and it's like, the old, sure, I'm a millennial, so I'm going to quote some Brené Brown and some, the daring greatly. But like, unless they're like down in the mud, right? Unless they're like out there in the trenches with us, you don't get to tell me. You don't get to tell me if what I'm doing is wrong. Let me see you try and then come back and tell me.
100%, which is exactly why we talk to other business owners about this. Unless we need a different perspective, it is absolutely like, unless you're in the arena,
That's right.
It's not happening. So there's so much personal growth that happens through this process, obviously, as we've been talking about. How have you changed as a person from the Rach who was like starting her business to now, to today, over that time period? How have you changed as a person?
So one of the biggest changes for me since I started my business to now has definitely been how I've thought about investing in my business financially. And so I made a commitment to myself that I wouldn't employ anyone that was dumber than me. Which sounds so like, and obviously you can tell I'm a small business owner because I say things like that. I'm not in a corporate, I'm not doing the corporate talk. I'm just like, they can't be dumber than me. Like I'm already here, right? So you got to like be a bit better than me. And I have so many skills and I have so many strengths and I have a whole bunch of weaknesses and blind spots. I mean, they're not blind, just spots. They're just spots that I know, that I know of. And so I'm very much of the thinking that I need to have people in my team who can fill those spots for me because I'm not filling them. And I don't want to fill them. I don't have any desire to be, at my computer doing the admin and data. Like I don't want to do that. I want to think about it. I want to like dictate to someone my ideas, but I don't want to sit there filling in an Excel spreadsheet. And so I think like I care deeply about having people around me that believe in what I'm doing, that care about what I'm doing. But also, I had this great employee. She literally just left me 2 days ago and I'm very sad about it. And she's been with me for 3.5 years. She has just incredible. She was incredibly overqualified for the position that she was doing in my organization, but I didn't have any other position for her to fulfill at the time. She was looking for work and so she started working for me. Incredible. I love her to death. She's one of my best friends. And she came to me a couple of months ago and she was, I knew she was going to leave me. I knew it was eventually going to happen. And then anyway, she finally came to me and we talked. And I've always encouraged her. I've said, like, you've only got one life. You should definitely do what you're passionate about. She's actually leaving my agency to go and manage one of the artists that we book for. And I'm just like, this is so great because now I'm going to be still working with her, but in her best context, right, where she can really thrive, where she can really grow and do her thing. And so I really care about investing in the women that I work with. And if I have to lose a few employees along the way because they go and chase their dreams, that's fine with me, So I think, that's the first thing is I think I grew up with the belief system that it's better to employ someone who's really cheap than someone who's really good, as a lot of us probably did. And so that was something I really had to break in my mind, was this barrier of just like, cheap doesn't mean good. Just because they're cheap, that's the work you're going to get, right? And so making sure that I was getting the right people, paying them decent salary or whatever, made sense for the role that they were doing, making sure that they were in whatever area they were working in, that they were smarter than me.
I love being able to learn from people that are a few steps ahead. No matter what, it has to be that context, doesn't it? You need someone who's a little bit further ahead. Someone maybe who's way ahead is great for aspirational in certain things. Someone who's a few steps behind can teach you something. And I'm talking from the sense of on the business journey more than anything. But yeah, to work with someone who you can learn a little bit from is really exciting, I think, as a business owner, because you just all of a sudden feel like you don't have to carry so much. We were talking off air before about regional living and internet as a bit of a joke, just regional Australia and its terrible internet, but also Australia in general and its terrible internet. Shout out NBN. You can sponsor this podcast if you like, but
yes.
Yeah, it's a bit shit. But what role has living and growing a business regionally played for you throughout this?
So, look, of course, the music industry is based a lot in capital cities. And I started my business when I was living in Sydney. We just relocated to the central west of New South Wales in a little town called Parkes in 2021. And that was, it's where my husband's family are from. My family are all living here now as well, my mum and dad and my siblings. And so it made sense that we would move here. We've got 3 little kids. And so, seemed like a good spot to move. Houses were affordable. I didn't have a lazy 10 mil lying around to buy, a shoebox apartment in Sydney. So, all the things. And so I think the main thing for me, and it might sound silly, but the main thing for me was the financial freedom that comes from living regionally has enabled me to invest in my business in ways that I couldn't have. I just wouldn't have had the finances if I was paying all of the costs associated with living in Sydney. And I don't know that living there would have made much difference to my ability to do my job. When I need to travel, I travel. It's a 4.5 hour drive to Sydney. Twice a week, we've got a plane that flies from Parkes to Sydney. And so if I need to travel, I can, and I can afford to because I'm not living in Sydney. I also just feel like, for me, it's good to have distance from what I do. And when I step outside of my office and I close my laptop lid, I walk into, my huge backyard with my kids and this big open sky. And I just feel like this immense freedom that I'm just not trapped, in what I do and in this music business. And the music business can be really debilitating. It's very, cutthroat. And so for me, it just brings a real sense of peace to live regionally. And I think the other thing is I just employed someone recently who does live in Parkes, but previously to that, all my employees were working remotely. I used to have someone in New Zealand. I've had someone in Melbourne. I've had someone in Toowoomba, like just all over Australia. And I feel very strongly about people managing their own workloads and about setting their own working hours. To me, it just seems like very normal that we don't need to micromanage our employees. I just have never understood it. And it's one of the things that bothered me the most about full-time work was just the fixation on hours spent. Because in my mind, I'm like, but aren't you paying me to do a job? And if I'm doing that job better than you expect, why do I have to sit at this desk and pretend to be working? It doesn't make any sense to me. And so, yes, I just feel very strongly that yes, sure, this is the hours that we've allocated each week for the tasks that you need to do. Go and do them. And if you need more hours than that and you need more salary, let me know. We'll make it happen. And if you feel like it's, you've got not enough work, let me know. We'll make that happen. And so I really trust my employees. I wouldn't employ people I don't trust. And I think that if you feel like you can't trust your employees, I think one of two things. Number one, either you got some issues going on that you need to deal with, or number two, maybe you don't have trustworthy employees and you shouldn't be employing them. And so I think it's pretty simple. So living remotely has enabled me to work remotely firstly, but also, and of course the pandemic, that changed everything, but just be very comfortable with having employees all across Australia.
I laugh thinking back to, some of my stints in corporate, not all of the moments, but some of the stints where you're like, shit, I definitely work twice as long as I probably should that's reasonable. I used to laugh at that line in contracts, fair and reasonable overtime. I'm like, who defines this fair and reasonable overtime? But that in the same breath, then, you do these longer nights, you do what you need to do to get a job done, but then having to reach out to someone and say, hey, I'm going to start at 10 a.m. tomorrow. Is that okay with you? It's that is something that's never really sat very well with me either. It's like if you've got a meeting that you're having to move, it's a different thing. But I have my best idea sometimes in the shower. Like, am I supposed to bill you for that time? Or do I take that out? When you're working on something, you're working. It's like your mind is on it. And it's so much less about the hours and the output. So I think it's great advice as well for anybody who's thinking about taking on teams into their business to think about it more as a lifestyle approach and what you would like. Where do you hope to see your business grow to over the foreseeable future, the short term, but also the long term?
I just really want the clients that I already have to become more well known. And there are some that are towards the back end of their careers already established, and there are others that are really just kicking off. Like one of my clients who is doing incredibly right now. She's played Glastonbury Festival last year, for example, and she's won arias for her last 2 records, and she's just incredible. And I just think when I look at clients like that, I just think your growth is my growth. And so when people are like, where do you see your business? I'm like, I see my clients getting more and more recognition for the art that they create, and then as a result of that, their fees increase and their ticket sales increase, and then my income increases. But I also, I have aspirations, of course, to grow my business into other areas. I see that there's a real need in the music industry for people who do work more personally with their clients across all facets. I've noticed as I've sort of delved in the music industry, this cookie cutter approach is not just exclusive to agency work. It's in lots of different parts of the music industry. And so I have plans towards the back end of this year, early into the new year, to officially launch 2 new arms of Sure Thing in different areas. And so I've already got kind of employees lined up to do those roles. And, that will cost me money to do that. And I kind of don't really care. I kind of just, I see a real need. And I feel like if you can find a need and you can meet that need, it will always result in profit. And so I feel really good about that. But at the same time, if I'm completely honest with you, right now in my life, I feel very overwhelmed with my workload. And I think that's most people who run small businesses. And I just don't know that I want to live that way for much longer. And so I'm doing everything I can right now to look at what's on my plate and try and outsource as much as I can. I'm trying to, take stock of what staff do I need so that I don't have to put my kids to bed at night and then go back to work at 8:30. And this is real talk, right? No one wants to talk about the dirty part of running your own business. And that is that truly I've got flexibility at my own expense. I pay for it later. And so I really want to kind of get to a point where I very much start whenever I start and I finish whenever I finish, and then the work will be there tomorrow and I will come back to it tomorrow. I'm not quite there yet. And I think there's always kind of, when you're in a period of growth, which my agency is, I think there's always going to be a time when you always feel like you're just behind the 8 ball, you're just behind it, right? You're never quite on top of it until you reach that happy medium. And so that's something I haven't found all the answers to yet. And I'm okay with that. I listened to this podcast recently, and so randomly they were it was a business podcast, but they were talking about narcissistic people randomly. And they were like, narcissists do this thing called future faking, where they promise their partners or family that, sometime in the future this will happen, and then the future never comes, right? And so I was like, yes, we all know a narcissist. And then they said, well, entrepreneurs are guilty of future faking to themselves and their partners. Mm-hmm. And it's not from the same dark place, but it's that we say, soon it will slow down, soon I'll be on top of the work, soon this, but then we make zero plans to get to that future, right? We just one day it'll happen magically. I don't know how. It's just going to magically appear that my workload decreases, the money rolls in, and things are good. And so as soon as I heard that, I was like, shot to the heart. I was like, that is me. Like, I just like one day it'll slow down. And so my husband and I have been talking a lot about this. What can we do so that our future is better than our present in terms of our future? Our present is great, but in terms of our workload and what we're going to life to look like, what plans can we make now so that we can get to that? And that begs the question, how much money is enough money? And I think we should all ask ourselves that.
Oh, I just am a little bit shot to the heart on that one as well. Like, yes, that's exactly it. Like, you have these huge dreams, like I'm going to work with this person and I'm going to generate this much money and I'm going to do this, but then you just get caught up in the day-to-day admin of it all, the responsive nature of it all, and the low-hanging fruit that you can work on to be able to like help the business grow, quote unquote, on paper, but you're never actually focusing on the steps you need to take to achieve that bigger picture, whether that be less workload, more systems, more processes to enable a more comfortable experience doing the work, or a more regular revenue stream by, creating that course or that whatever, the thing that you can sell passively. You just never quite get to it. So yeah, that's a really great point. And I think it will probably hit home with a lot of us as well, that we are guilty of that. I'm going to go as soon as we hang up from this podcast and take action on a couple of things because you're
right. Same girl, same. And look, by the way, a lot of the wisdom that I have is not my wisdom. It is just me taking in others' wisdom and then being like, that hit with me and I'm going to share it with the other future fakers, and then we can all fake the future together and hopefully improve,
That is what we are all about. Like, as business owners as well, we have so many inputs, like, business podcasts, books that we read, advice we get from other people. Like, it is our duty to share this stuff because, as we've talked about, statistics of failure in business are dire and really unfortunate. And so much of it comes down to the personal growth aspect of it that's really, really hard for a lot of us to face. It brings up all of our shit, whether it be a scarcity complex, whether it be, a fear of failure publicly, or self-doubt, whatever that is, that all comes up. And then there is all the other stuff that we don't know that can be our undoing. And we have a duty to share that, I think, with each other more often and not sugarcoat it. All wisdom is good wisdom, no matter where it comes from. We've just got to keep sharing it. So I loved it.
Yay. I love that. I love it too. So, but you're right. I think, look, it's so hard being a small business owner and there's so much to learn. But I love just when you were like, it brings up stuff for us. And I think that's the number one takeaway. If people are like, what's your number one business? My number one business advice is always just like, know yourself. And I think that like whatever form, however you get to know yourself, I think that like everything stems from understanding our core belief system, and then everything kind of goes from there.
Absolutely. So my final question to you as part of our chat today, because you have shared so very much and it's so valuable to let people into your business journey a little bit to help them grow and see themselves into their next phase as well. What can we do to support you in return? How can we say thank you for that gift?
Oh my gosh, that's so kind. Look, I think that the best way people can probably support me is just to go and find my music in terms of my agency, or actually all the music of the artists that I represent. And so my agency website is surethingagency.com, and all my artists are listed there. But I, have handpicked these artists and I really believe in them. And so the more people that kind of hear about these artists and fall in love with their music, as a result of that impacts my business. And so if you're a music lover or not, go and have a look at my website, see the artists I work with, and see if there's one of those that you really connect with and that you feel like you can support. And that would mean a lot to me.
Amazing. And I will pop a couple of links in the show notes so the listener can head straight there now, head to the show notes, click through, find it. And we'll get around as much as we can. And like I said, there's some really bloody great music. I've been listening in preparation and really enjoying it. So I'll absolutely make that available for the listener. Raechel, it's been so lovely chatting with you, getting to know you, getting to hear your story. Thank you for being here with me today.
Not a problem, Kim. And thank you for taking a risk, creating a podcast where we can talk about business, because I think it's very much needed, especially in Australia. And so just very grateful for you and what you do.
Thank you for listening to Unemployed and Afraid, the podcast for small business builders with your host, me, Kim Curtin. If you love it, you can say thanks with a star rating and a review. And of course, join the community on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and LinkedIn. Find us at Unemployed and Afraid wherever you're hanging out, and I'll see you there.